As you know, with our company, peat is the main component of the mix. However, in today's industry, there are competitive mixes out there, and there are also new organic substrates available to be substituted for peat moss. What I need to know from you is basically what should a grower be advised on if he's going to compare peat moss against cocoa fiber?
Well, Brian, there's a lot of misinformation out there about cocoa fiber and peat. Many people try to equate the two as and the cocoa fiber as a peat substitute, but in actuality it's simply another class of material to use. It won't substitute for peat, but it can be used in concert with it. The only real similarity between the two is that coconut fiber has similar total porosity compared to peat moss, but the other characteristics are not quite the same. There's a difference in wettability, there's a difference in longevity and how long they'll last in a mix, but perhaps the biggest difference between peat and coconut fiber is the way that the things are processed and the variability that we find in coconut fiber from one process batch to another process batch. So a grower could get one batch of cocoa fiber in and it works great for him. The next batch will be very different, and it'll be like night and day. So there's a tremendous amount of variability in coconut fiber, more so than there is that we find for peat.
Bill, as you know, with our company, quality control is number one. To guarantee even stricter controls on quality, as of 1994, Berger became ISO 9001 certified. Is ISO 9001, in your mind, a good thing?
Okay. Well, Brian, that's one of the things that is most confusing for growers, because I have yet to talk to a company that doesn't think they have great quality control. But as a matter of fact, ISO 9001 is a separate organization that comes in and reviews all of the information about a company, not only quality control, but how they run their business and everything. And so to be ISO 9001 certified is a tremendous asset to the company. In fact, I think that all the companies that bid on working with the space shuttle have to be ISO 9001 certified. So for a mixed company to be ISO 9001 certified is really quite an accomplishment.
Another question that we have to cover and discuss is shelf life. The terminology shelf life is used quite often, and salespeople relate to the buyers that shelf life is important, and it is important in that they must use up the product within a determined amount of time. Bill, keeping that in mind, how long then should we be able to store a mix in a grower's warehouse?
Okay. Well, of course, ideally the best use is to use it as soon as you get it. But typically what we find is that mixes that are less than 4 months old can be used right away, and there's no real change in longevity of their wetting agents. The longer you let that mix sit, the less effective the wetting agent becomes. And it's not because it's not a good wetting agent, because they're good wetting agents, but the microbes begin to work on them and they lose their effectiveness over time. So I think 4 months is the best time to use it, in the first 4 months. Then after that, the grower needs to pay a little more attention to wetting that mix up initially and to making sure that he's got good wettability.
Bill, out in the field immediately after harvesting, we have to stockpile the peat. What I need to know is the problems that can occur if the stockpiles are left out too long in the field.
Well, Brian, stockpiling can be an issue with peat, particularly if you leave them, the peat stockpiled too long. And unfortunately, anytime that you take organic matter of any kind and you put them in big piles, they will begin to degrade and to compost, if you will. And so they tend to heat up. And with peat, particularly, if you leave them stockpiled in large rows like that, then the core, the center of it, begins to get very hot and the structure begins to break down. So the fibers themselves can become quite fine, and you lose the structure that you originally had.
Berger is definitely concerned about the overheating of the peat moss in the stockpiles as it sit out in the field. Within a 3-week period, they bring it in and they wrap it. What I need to know, is there any benefit to that?
Well, typically, peat is harvested in the late summer and early fall, and then they're left in these stockpiles all winter long. So there are many months where they stay in the stockpiles. And if you're removing them in 3 weeks from the time that those stockpiles are made and putting them into smaller sizes, you're doing two things. One, you're compressing it a little bit so that you can keep that structure. That reduces the airspace in it, and it reduces the chances of them overheating by keeping them in smaller groups. So any reduction like that should greatly reduce the chances of damage that you would get from stockpiling.
Bill, I'd really appreciate and like to thank you for spending the time with us today and sharing all the great ideas with us and with growers.
Well, Brian, it was my pleasure today, and I certainly enjoyed my time with you again.
Growers, we thank you for spending the time with us today, and we hope that you are able to get the most out of your mix.